Hello, my name is Kinlock and I really like musicals. So when I go see a musical, I have a lot of thoughts and then I like to put those thoughts out into the world like this. So hopefully that's why you're here and you want to know what I think about Wicked. Because I just saw Wicked again. I've seen it a few other times. It's sort of been the musical that's followed me around my entire adult life. Like it came out while I was at drama school. So it's a time in my life when I was living, eating, breathing musical theatre every day, all day. And Wicked was this amazing sort of sensation. It was just like, wow, this is so good. Oh, to be alive in the time of Wicked. Ah! And so ever since then, it's just never stopped running. It's been running for 20 years. More than 20 years now on Broadway, which is pretty phenomenal. So you probably are semi-familiar with it. I'm going to try not to over-explain it, but I might have to give a little bit of context in case you don't know every lyric to every song. So weird to think that there might be people like that, but you know, there might be. So it takes place in Oz, famous for the Wizard of Oz. And so it's like a subversive take on kind of the Oz characters. So rather than the Wicked Witch of the West just being this villain who they are trying to defeat, the show Wicked explores her life, her growing up, how she got to where she got to, and who she really is. If you take away the titles like Wicked and Witch, who is Elphaba? That's kind of what this show is about. That is what they call her, Elphaba. Right, cool. So I've seen this show many times and I've always really, really enjoyed it. A big part of why Wicked is so successful and why I've always really enjoyed it is that the music is just whoomp. Like, it showcases the performers and it relies on these really powerhouse performances, and it kind of catapulted Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth into a different orbit, the way that it just elevated their careers, because these songs are so iconic, these roles are so iconic, and they're linked to those performers because they really get to show the best of their abilities. Like Idina Menzel is really great at belting loudly and high and being powerful vocally. So Elphaba is written in a way that showcases all of that. Kristen Chenoweth is hilarious, goofy, funny. She's just so silly, quirky, funny, got this cute little voice. But then when she sings, she can do everything. She does opera, but then she also can easily blend her voice to match Idina Menzel's when they're duetting, and there's just nothing Kristen Chenoweth can't do. Honestly. And so you get the sense that these parts, and especially vocally, were really molded around these types of performers. I realize Idina Menzel didn't do the out-of-town tours for Wicked, but you don't have to at me for that. Okay. I'm not trying to erase that person. Oh, maybe I don't know her name. See, I've erased her. Okay, so what did I think of Wicked this time I saw it? Because I think it was like the 6th time I've seen it. I've seen it several times in several different countries and over different years and stuff. And I've just always really enjoyed it. And it has always been due to these performances, especially the ones that play Glinda and Elphaba, and seeing all these skills that they get to show off, but other roles as well, you know. Okay. This time I saw it in Melbourne. It's running at the moment. And I thought that the cast was terrible. So I don't really want to dwell on that because there could be a million different reasons. It might be that they didn't get a lot of decent direction. It might be that they were just miscast. It doesn't mean that they're bad performers, but they have perhaps been given roles that they're not suited to. Might just be that they don't know how to act. But yeah, again, don't cast people who can't act. Maybe they could act if they were in a different role. Maybe this production's paying really bad, and so they've had to go with cheaper, worse talent than usual. That's sort of how it felt to me, because everyone seemed quite young. So I don't really want to dwell on the performers. I don't want to bag anyone. I might have to sort of explain what made some performances less good, but really what I want to focus on is that it was such an interesting experience watching this show that I've always really, really enjoyed, and suddenly not enjoying the performances. And so it forced me to focus on different parts of the show, in particular like the script and the set and the costumes and just the way the story is put together. And it kind of revealed some things that I haven't noticed, or that in the past I've been willing to forgive, and they seemed less forgivable now. So I want to talk about those things, especially from the angle of the Wicked movie, or movies, are being put together at the moment. I'm pretty sure they've been filmed and now they're in the editing process, because the first one comes out at the end of this year. The second one comes out, I believe, at the end of next year. And so it kind of makes me think, okay, well, what am I wanting to see from the films that I think the stage show didn't quite get right, or things that no longer feel right in the stage show, even if 20 years ago they were perfectly acceptable. So what are those things? Okay, one is to do with the age of these characters and the time that the show takes place over. Okay. Basically, the show, if we just sort of think chronologically, earliest moment to latest moment, we meet the characters when they're young and they're at school, and it seems like a boarding school sort of situation, and they have roommates, and it's this odd pairing where these two very different girls get paired to share a room, and they have to learn to live with each other, and lo and behold, instead of hating each other, they end up becoming friends, and that's sort of a story that plays out, and they sort of get challenges to take on evil forces, and lo and behold, who's the one that proves to have the greatest moral compass? It's the wicked one, and the supposedly good witch is very sort of conflicted and tries to appease everybody, and sort of manages to sort of come out without mud sticking to her, but she wasn't always completely honourable in how she got there. Kinda. So they sort of have this schooling kind of career where we're figuring out what their relationship is with each other, and then as soon as that kind of establishes that, okay, no, they're going to be friends, that's when suddenly they have to go meet the Wizard of Oz, and that was an exciting thing because they don't know really what the audience knows, because we've all seen the Wizard of Oz, right? And at this point, everyone's also seen Wicked, right? I mean, haven't we? And so they don't realize that the wizard is a charlatan, that he doesn't actually have all these magical powers that he claims to have. And so when they find that out, the disillusionment, Elphaba, they react differently. But Elphaba is just like, wow, you said you're something that you're not, and I placed all this trust in you, and so I'm gonna defy gravity. I mean, what does that mean? I don't know. It just means she's gonna fly. And if you care to find her, look to the western sky. Yeah. So that's the turning point in the show, and then after that, everything becomes a witch hunt, and suddenly there seems to be like a time jump into the second act, and Glinda, instead of being at school, she's now like a public figure, as she calls herself. She's in charge of things, and she's about to marry Fiyero, who was like the love triangle of it all between them, but and Elphaba's sister is now the governor of Munchkinland because their father died. So it seems like a bit of time has passed, but also like they don't say how much time has passed, and I mean it can't be that much time because no one has seen or heard anything of Elphaba for this time. No one knows what's happened to her, and we never find out what she's been doing all this time either. So like, I don't know. Yeah. So basically, all of Act 1 seems to take place over maybe like the course of a year. And then Act 2 seems to be, I don't know, a month later, a year later, 5 years later. It's hard to say, but they seem a bit more grown up. So yeah, maybe a couple of years later. But then all of the action within Act 2 seems to take place within like a few days. So we sort of see them going from quite young to then being older. But I don't know how long it all takes. And for some reason, that didn't really bother me before. But this time watching it, it just really stuck out to like, I'm having trouble processing this timeline and I can't make it all fit. And here's a part of the problem that I'm hoping the film makes clearer, and I also think touches on other reasons that this script like annoyed me, is because when they're at school, they only ever talk about it as school. So in my mind, I'm thinking it's like a boarding school, Hogwarts sort of situation, and they are 15 or 16, right? And they sort of act like juvenile, especially Glinda at this point, and especially Fiyero at this point. And so it sort of makes sense to me that they're sort of teenagers. They're all going to this exclusive boarding school, and also the costumes sort of sell that, because while the elites like Elphaba, Glinda, Fiyero, Nessa, Rose, they don't wear uniforms, they just wear whatever they want to wear. Everyone else in the school seems to have like these preppy kind of blazers and stuff, and the stripes and the school colors, and they sing like the school anthem, and it feels very British private school coded. So it makes you think they're teenagers. But then suddenly in Act 2, they all seem like they're 10 years older. And yet the script would suggest that only like a few months maybe has passed. So I found that very confusing. And I have read the book that Wicked is based on. So I do know that in the book, they all meet not at high school, but at university. And so that sort of makes a little bit more sense why, they don't have to wear a uniform. And obviously in the States, like, it's such a kind of cultural thing that you have roommates that you meet at college. And so it is more conceivable that they would be a bit older. And then when you in Act 2, when they're no longer at school and suddenly they're all like leaders and of, I so don't have the words for like that aristocratic kind of feudal system. Is that it? So like a governor who rules with an iron fist over munchkins, and I want to say princess, but Glinda has princess energy anyway, but I don't think she actually is a princess, although she nearly marries Fiero and he's a prince. Anyway, they're in that sort of world of like fantasy rulers, okay? And it's like, well, what? Is this your first year out of school and you've done that? I don't know. So what I'm trying to say is maybe it makes more sense if the school is actually a university. And also we only sort of really have like that 1 year at school that we see, and then suddenly they're all like in very high positions. So maybe it would make more sense if it was like a post-grad diploma or post-grad degree kind of thing that they were doing, where it was just like 1 year at Shiz. Shiz is the name of the university school. I don't know what it is. And so, okay, what I started saying was I've read the book. I know that in the book it's a college or university, but it never read that way to me in the musical. And they never define how old they are or whether it's a school, a high school, or, I mean, maybe it's a primary school for all we know. But they never define if it's a school of some kind or a university or like a post-grad place of study. They just don't. And because the musical departs from the book in many other ways, I don't think we can assume that it's definitely a university the same way that it definitely is in the book, because it does heaps of things differently from the book. So I want the musical to tell the audience what it is. Also, not many people have read the book, so you kind of need to tell people. And if you're only ever referring to it as school, we were all school friends, we met at school, then and you're going to have people wearing school uniforms or what look like school uniforms, then yeah, we're going to think that you're teenagers. We're going to think that you're 16, 17. And then when you suddenly in Act 2 are all way more grown up, it doesn't ring it's strange. Yeah, I couldn't make sense of it. Okay, so the timeline. That is something that I'm hoping the films sort of make a bit clearer. Just please give us someone's age at some point in time, or give us some sense of passing of time. Are they at Shiz together for 4 years maybe? We don't know. Okay. And then on a smaller scale, like the time of it all, the way there was this one scene that so had me scratching my head, and it's so like just the stupidest thing, but it's also just indicative of like the script kind of going, oh yeah, this is a good scene. But wait, what? How does this make sense? Okay, so they have a classroom scene. They were all at school, and it's a history class, and the teacher is bleating on about the past. And then he goes to flip a blackboard, and there's this kind of offensive message scrawled on the blackboard, and he gets all shocked, and he's like, okay, class dismissed, all leave now. And we'll come back to the blackboard later, but where I'm going with this little rant about the timing of it all, Alphaba has a soft spot for this teacher, and when he kicks everyone out, they all leave, but she stays and is like, hey, do you want to share my lunch? And so they sit down, they have lunch together. So that implies that it's lunchtime, but he sent them all off to lunch, 5 minutes early or whatever. Cool. And then a couple of minutes later, in walks this other teacher and says, Alphaba, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be on your way to my class? Which makes no sense, because if she thinks that Alphaba is supposed to be on her way to the class, then surely that teacher should also be on her way to that class. Otherwise, how are they both going to get there for this class, which is, by the way, a one-on-one class. So it's not like there's anyone else they have to get there at the same time, kind of, is what I'm getting at. So that sort of makes no sense. Shouldn't you be on your way to my class? But then also, like, he dismissed everyone before class had actually ended, and this is only a couple of minutes later. So actually, I would have thought that class would still be going. So there isn't anywhere else that Alphaba is supposed to be. Also, it's been implied by the fact that they're eating lunch that it's lunchtime. So why would she be on her way to a class? I don't get it. And then cut to the next scene, and basically everyone is just milling around in the playground, in the quad, whatever we're calling it. This is how much I don't know if it's a primary school or a university. And they seem to all be having a lunchtime. So I'm like, all right, so it is lunchtime, actually. What? like, it's just an unnecessarily confusing bit of dialogue, and it's such a throwaway line because she's just like, oh, what are you doing here? But she could have just said, oh, what are you doing here? She didn't have to be like, you should be on your way to my class right now, because that makes us go, what time of day is it? It makes me do that. So obviously I've seen this show so many times and that's never bothered me before, but this time it was so distracting. So it doesn't make me dislike the show or anything. I'm just kind of like, maybe now I get why it didn't win Best Musical at the Tonys that year, because it has a couple of little things that could make more sense. Basically what this boils down to is that it doesn't really do any world building, right? So yeah, just not understanding how old they are, not understanding whether they're at school or university. It's sort of part of this bigger picture of the fact that you don't really quite ever learn what the rules are in this world, and you're supposed to sort of just know it because you watched The Wizard of Oz once when you were a child. And it's not quite enough. Yeah. Another way in which that sort of plays out is with Alphaba's magical powers. There's kind of this recurring theme where she has visions. So the first one is she's singing The Wizard and I, where she's singing about how, wow, one day I want to meet the wizard, and that's going to be so cool because he's a magical, amazing, wonderful wizard. And then she just goes, oh, I just had a vision, almost like a prophecy. And so you sort of assume that, like, she's in the middle of singing when this happens, so you sort of think that you'd be able to spot the moment where it happens. And I have, with other performers, sort of seen them do like I just had a vision, almost like a prophecy. Whereas this time that I saw it, it was so strange. The actor was walking off stage, so we're sort of seeing the side of her, almost kind of the back of her, and then she's just like, stops and turns and goes, I just had a vision, almost like a prophecy. And it's like, why are you turning to an imaginary audience that isn't actually there and telling us that you just had a vision? Like, if you, I mean, I don't know. I don't have a lot of visions, but I would have thought that it would stop you in your tracks and you'd be like, oh, it's in front of me. I'm going to stay. This is the vision. You're not going to quickly like turn away from that vision and be like, I just had a vision. Bizarre choice. Bad acting choice, sure. But also just like, I think the actor needs help from the lights or, some sort of sound effect or something that helps key us into this language of this is what's happening to Elphaba in this moment. Whereas we don't get that. And so there's a couple of other moments later in the show, like she has this moment where she just knows that something's happening to her sister. And when that happens, there actually is this kind of visual clue of, you can sort of see like a shadow of like the house that, gets caught in the twister and lands on her. And so there's a couple of like images that pop up and it's sort of like, oh, suddenly we're seeing what Elphaba is seeing. Oh, okay, cool. That's a nice little visual language thing. But then the other time that it sort of happens, and maybe this is a vision, maybe this isn't, but Fiyero, the man she's in love with, gets kind of carried off for trying to like rescue her and be kind to her. And she just knows that he's, I don't know, having some violent thing happen to him. And so she casts the spell so that he doesn't die, exactly. And like, I think that's sort of the result of like a vision. She knows something's happening to him and is trying to stop it and doesn't quite know what it is and doesn't quite know how she's going to fix it. But again, there's nothing happens there to link it to the other times, and I would have liked that to happen. So there's some sort of like, visual language. I think I've said it 5 times, but I'm going to keep coming back to it because that's sort of what theatre does, usually. And it doesn't in this case. Another thing I just noticed this time so much more is that there aren't really any great, amazing set pieces. There are bits of set that fly in and fly out and like, but there's usually just kind of like one thing in the middle of the floor, or there's like a couple of little panels that sort of suggest a space. It's an enormous stage and it's often very bare so that you can get the whole ensemble on dancing and stuff, I guess, and like showing off their costumes, which like the ensemble costumes are phenomenal. So I get that. But it kind of just made me go, sometimes it doesn't really paint a great picture for like where we are. And the biggest example that I sort of think of with that is just after Elphaba and Glinda have like been put into this shared room together as roommates, and they're writing letters home going, hey parents, guess what? I have this roommate that I don't like. Oh, and it turns into this song where it's loathing, unadulterated loathing. And then out of nowhere, the stage just fills with every other ensemble member and they start dancing. And there's nothing to suggest where they are, whether they're actually in the same space as each other or not, or what. And I've sort of always pictured that they were both in their room next to their beds, kind of like eyeing each other off, but maybe they're not. And maybe they're not even in the same space. And I would just like to know what's happening. I can imagine it being like in the library or something, or like Elphaba's alone in the library writing this letter and everyone else is like in the cafeteria having this big song and dance number about what a freak Elphaba is. That would sort of paint a picture, and it sort of doesn't really happen that way, and it just doesn't really justify why everyone else gets involved. So I found that song weirdly just confusing. But like, I really like that song, so I think I've always forgiven it in the past, and this time I just saw everything really differently, so it's quite interesting. I said I was going to come back to the blackboard. Okay, I'll tell you why. So, flips over the blackboard and it says, animals should be seen and not heard. And this is like some shocking political statement because there's this storyline about how animals in Oz can talk, but the overlords, or well, what we learn to be is like the wizard really, forcing them to not talk, so and just be treated as animals. And I don't know. It sort of makes more sense in the book, I think. I mean, why are we supposed to care about that? I don't know. It doesn't do a great job of making you care about that, but Alphaba cares about that. No one else does, but Alphaba does. Anyway, this blackboard flips over and we see this writing on there. And it's just bizarre because we all know what chalk on a blackboard looks like. And we could probably imagine what paint on a blackboard looks like. I don't know what this is written with within the world of the show. Like, it looks too perfect. It's like glossy stickers or something. It doesn't feel like someone's painted it. It doesn't feel like handwriting is the thing. It's just these words printed on the blackboard, and it's like, what are we supposed to be thinking this is? It just looks janky. And there were a few moments where things just, maybe 20 years ago, things were allowed to look like that on stage, and you just went, oh, well, we need to be able to read it from the back row. But, like, they just didn't look good. And another things was with a couple of the costumes had sort of odd finishings, like the monkey costumes. I really dislike the monkey costumes. They really just look like someone's wearing a flesh-coloured unitard, or like maybe like a furry bear costume or something where like half the fur has fallen off. Like, it doesn't, there's sort of like patches of fur, but it looks like it's unintentional. It's a weird look, and they're pretty ugly. And they don't actually look like monkeys. They just look like ugly people. And another one was when, not Glinda, Alphaba, that other one, yeah. Alphaba. She's green, by the way. She has green skin. And the way that you achieve that is that she's got green makeup on her face, but then the rest of her body has like skin-tight green bodysuit. And for the most part, she keeps herself covered up, so you just kind of see these green hands and green face, and that's fine. But there's this one moment where she's trying to like be a bit dressier, and I guess she has some confidence for some reason. And so she wears a sleeveless dress, so it's got like the straps, and it's kind of a bit, it's not low cut, but it's, it shows a bit of a décolletage, and like there's no sleeves, and it just looked a little bit baggy here. It looked like she was wearing a suit, like some sort of, it didn't look like her skin, it looked like a skin suit. And then even to the point where when she turned around at the back, because she's got a lower sitting dress, you could see the zipper at the back. And it's just like, come on, guys, we're supposed to be able to believe that this is her green skin. Cover up the zipper. Like, you didn't have to use a dress that exposed that. It's very strange. And as I say, haven't noticed that, haven't cared about that in the past. But for some reason, this time, all these things just seemed like a bit dated, a bit shabby. And I was like, yeah, it's the right time for a film because this needs an injection of new life to be brought to Wicked. And I'm hoping that it translates into doing something different with the stage version. I really think that, yeah, it deserves a shake-up. It's like, we're not getting sick of the songs, we're not getting sick of the story because, you know, there's some beautiful moments and there are some really well-written scenes in here with some really tender moments and funny moments, and that I still have so much love for Wicked, but I'd like to see it kind of go back to the drawing board a little bit and show us a new production of it. Yeah. Okay, I'm ready for a new production of it, and that is why I'm so ready for the film. The film's going to be so cool. Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande. I'm very excited about that. It feels sort of like a rematch. A rematch? No, it feels like another cultural moment, sort of like when Dreamgirls came out of like the Beyonce and Jennifer Hudson moment, and then, you know, facing off against each other at the Oscars. I wonder if we're going to see that with Cynthia and Ariana, whether they'll both be up for Oscars, or one of them will and one of them won't, or I don't know. I mean, there's 2 movies coming out in 2 different years. Maybe they'll get an Oscar each in different years, and they'll both be leads, or maybe one will be supporting. And there's the other thing I was kind of wanting to talk about, which is Glinda. She's not a supporting role. To me, she just is the main character. Because, yes, Elphaba gets all the best music, honestly, and gets all the glory with the flying and the belting and the riffs. But, I mean, if it's not for Glinda, if you don't have a good Glinda, the whole show falls apart. And that just became so evident to me when I saw it this time, because I didn't have a good Glinda. Like, she was deeply unfunny, and Glinda has to be funny. Oh, she makes so many jokes all the time, and if they don't land, it's excruciating. And that's sort of what I was experiencing with like Glinda, who could not make me laugh. And then when she does Popular and she gets to be even weirder and goofier, it's like, this felt like a different character, because nothing you've done up till now, this doesn't mesh with what you've been doing up till now, which was so unfunny, and now this is really goofy. It did not work, okay? But yeah, it makes me think that Glinda is a way more challenging role in a lot of respects than Elphaba, because Elphaba, you have to be able to belt a lot. And the acting, you have to be able to act, but I feel like the acting is fairly consistent. It's a fairly consistent story, whereas Glinda really has to be able to, she's like an octopus, has to be able to fit herself into small spaces and then take up a lot of room as well. Like, she has to be funny and quirky and likable, but also sort of bitchy and like, mean girl-ish, and also like romantic and sweet, but also spiteful and hateful. But then also she's conflicted because she's sort of like torn between these 2 worlds, and what do I do? And then she develops her own strength of character by the end, which is so beautiful to watch, and all while having the voice of an angel. An angel. Yeah, that's a lot of thoughts. But those are the thoughts I had when I went to see Wicked a couple of nights ago. And I will just finish with this, even though I really re-examined it and thought, it's got a few things that aren't that great. I will still say I really just love it as a show. And there's this line that Glinda says about Fiyero when she realizes, I don't know, she says, I want him. And I don't even think he's perfect anymore, and I still want him. That's sort of how I feel about Wicked. It's like, I love it. I don't even think it's perfect anymore, but I still love it.